Talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday right here on GB News. 4 to the point.
Hello and welcome. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big stories hitting the headlines right now. The show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course, it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times disagreeing, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, it's Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson and also comedian Leo Kearse. But first, let's take a look at the latest news headlines.
Hello, I'm Karen Roberts. This is your news at 4 o'clock. The Prime Minister will deliver a tough message on climate change at the G20 summit in Rome. Boris Johnson will say that countries causing the most global warming must be held accountable. The summit comes ahead of the COP26 Global Climate Conference in Glasgow, which starts on Monday. He'll urge leaders to follow through on their commitments to cut carbon emissions.
One thing we've got to achieve is to ensure that we keep alive the prospect of restricting the growth in the temperature of our planet to 1.5 degrees by the end of the century. That's what it's all about. If we can do that, then we stop the prospect of so much desertification. We stop the prospect of the huge geopolitical consequences of climate change.
The Prime Minister also gave an update on the Queen's health. After speaking with Her Majesty, Boris Johnson says she's in very good form and he wishes her well.
It's very important that she should follow her doctor's advice, but as you know, she's determined to be there at the cenotaph. I've no doubt that will happen. I think that we've just got to let her get on and rest. But as you know, she's very, very hard working. She continues to be at her desk.
Meanwhile, Boris Johnson has told the European Commission President that French threats over fishing rights are unjustified and incompatible with the post-Brexit trade agreement. France is threatening to block British boats from its ports and tighten checks on vessels if the dispute isn't resolved by Tuesday. The Prime Minister is due to hold a short meeting with the French President Emmanuel Macron tomorrow. And thousands of climate activists are demonstrating in Rome, demanding immediate action to save the planet's main roads leading to the G20 venue are being blocked by the protesters in what's been a peaceful rally before COP26 gets underway. Prince Andrew has unequivocally denied accusations that he sexually abused Virginia Giuffre when she was 17. In a document filed to a district court in the US, the Duke of York's lawyers said the allegations are baseless and were an attempt to achieve another payday. Miss Giuffre claims that she was trafficked by convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Royal correspondent Ingrid Seward told GB News it's good that the Duke is now addressing the claims.
In a nutshell, what Andrew's lawyers are saying is that, she's decided to pick Andrew because he's very high profile. They still insist that he is totally innocent, and it's a very strong case that they've put, but we still don't know exactly what's going to happen. But this is quite positive, and at last they've actually said something.
And more than 1.6 million people will be invited for a coronavirus booster vaccine next week. NHS England says around 9.5 million booster invitations have already been sent out in England, and more than 6 million doses were administered in the first 6 weeks. Over half of eligible people aged over 50 and over 2/3 of people over 80 have received the third dose. And when in Rome, while most people are focusing on the G20 summit, the partners of the world's leaders went on a special tour of the Colosseum. Carrie Johnson and Brigitte Macron were among those who took part in the event as they greeted onlookers. Heavy security surrounded the 2,000-year-old stone Roman amphitheatre, which was closed to the public. Well, that's your news update. I'll be back in half an hour with the latest headlines. Let's return to Nana Akua.
Well, what can I say about the fish situation? What a load of codswallop. Basically, unless French fisher people, I think that's what the phrase we're using these days, are granted more licences to fish in British water, then hell will be unleashed in the form of threats which include checking British boats, stopping them from landing in French ports, hindering customs arrangements, hiking up energy prices and even cutting off the power in Jersey. Remember Total Recall, my favourite film? They cut off the oxygen on Mars in the scene where their eyes go all boggly. Sorry, I digress. All of that seems somewhat of an overreaction and something smelt a bit fishy until this blazing revelation from the French Prime Minister Jean Castex, who has written to Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission President, and said that it needs to be made clear that leaving the Union is more damaging than remaining in it. So basically, we're being punished for daring to leave the EU. I actually hear a lot of people blaming Brexit for this current crisis. But before we joined the EU, these waters would have belonged to the UK in any case. So you could actually argue that joining the EU has actually caused this. A lot of the problems we're facing are, in my view, more a result of globalisation, which joining the EU could be seen as an example of. Globalisation is a bit like the reverse of Brexit, and it's actually a stark reminder that we shouldn't have sold out our means of production to other countries who will, in case of war or dispute, flex their muscles and exert pressure on the things that they own that we rely on, like gas, electricity, water, and even PPE. I mean, remember that one. Our reliance on China for the most basic things meant we didn't have the internal capacity to accommodate the people in this country. It's a no-brainer. As a result of our reliance on foreign labour, we've lost skills like nursing, shipbuilding, plumbing, truck driving, because we bought into this notion that we could import everything on the cheap and we wouldn't actually have to lift an industrial finger to get the less popular jobs done. Well, now, of course, it's come to bite us on the behind because Brexit has exposed just how fragile we've allowed ourselves to become. And if we had carried on with that trajectory, we'd have found ourselves even further up the creek without a paddle. It's not so much about taking control, but more about being in control. Well, this latest debacle is heating up faster than the planet. The French are talking about the UK paying for migrant checks at Calais, which cost the French almost £7 million per year. The British border has been enforced on French soil since the treaty signed in Le Touquet in 2003, which prevents migrants from reaching the UK, where they can claim asylum. And to be honest, this all needs an overhaul in any case. In my mind, the UK needs processing centres in Calais so that migrants can claim asylum for the UK from Calais to stop perilous channel crossings and dangerous attempts to stow away on trucks. This whole situation with the EU is like a bad relationship. We've all had one of those. I've had quite a few. An ex who simply can't accept the fact that it's over, unleashing every possible weapon in their armament. Thank God they haven't got an EU army. So before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. So on the way, our big debate this hour, should conversion therapy be outlawed in the UK? Detailed proposals have been published by the government to do just that. A 6-week consultation will invite views on ending coercive attempts to change someone's sexuality or gender identity unless they are given informed consent. The Queen has been advised by doctors to rest for 2 more weeks. The 95-year-old won't attend any official visits but could complete some light duties, including virtual audiences. We'll get the latest from friend of the show, royal correspondent Caroline Aston. And this show is nothing without you, so tell me what you think on everything we're discussing by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or send me a tweet at GBNews. Right, let's get started. Welcome again to my panel, Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson and comedian Leo Kearse. So welcome. welcome.
Leo's back.
Yeah, he's back. Rawr. So firstly, I want to talk to you about this story that I was just talking about. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has acknowledged turbulence in the UK's relationship with France and all this fishing rights. So I'm
These fishermen.
The fish people.
Fish people sounds like mermaids or something.
It sounds like those toys that the heads used to come off, you know, the ones with that had a little plane. So
There must be at least one female fisher person, though.
A female fisherman, yeah.
You can't have female fisherman. Surely saying fisher person is a bit simpler than saying female fisherman.
Or just a fisherman, I don't know.
It's like saying female man. So you are in support of transgenderism.
See, I just tried to be all inclusive there, and it sort of didn't work.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's a bad package holiday. So what do you think then, Calvin?
Well, it's not a case of even needing more licences. You said the French need more licences. We've granted licences to everyone who was already fishing in UK waters. That if they could prove that they were fishing in UK waters, if they had evidence, we gave them a licence, which I don't think we should have done, because too many foreign fishermen are in our waters taking our fish. That was part of the whole process of Brexit. We wanted to reclaim our sovereignty and reclaim our waters, and we haven't done it yet, because we've given them 5 or so years to kind of get used to the idea. So why are the French crying over a handful, I think it's literally dozens of fishermen that couldn't prove that they were already in the waters? So these are new people trying to take a chance at getting into our waters and taking our fish. Why are the French crying about it and over-escalating and taking it all out of proportion? I don't get what... It's political, isn't it?
Well, of course it is, but I like the way you call it our fish. I mean, if they swim on the other side, then they're their fish. Just depends where they go.
Our waters, our fish.
Yeah.
We can have the water, but the water also moves as well. It's all a bit... It's quite interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, this is a classic example of politics getting in the way of ordinary people trying to make a living and do their jobs. I mean, this, the political machinations and the battles over Brexit, it's something for top-level politicians to deal with, but instead they're using fishermen as pawns. And in reality, we need to catch fish in our waters and sell it to France, because we don't... A lot of the fish that's caught, like langoustines in Scotland, we don't eat those. We sell them to France. And in Britain, we just eat the fingers. I
was going to say...
The rest of the fish... The rest of the fish...
The worst bits.
No, the rest of the fish can go to... haggis isn't a fish.
I know.
I just need to educate at that point.
But an example of things that you guys eat.
Well, they're easy to catch. They've one leg's shorter than the other, so they walk sideways around a hill. So you just need to set a net for them. But this is something that's I hate to see just working people on both sides, the French side and the British side, being used as pawns in some sort of high level, almost like a Cold War, a proxy war between Europe and Britain. And really, it needs to be resolved amicably, because as much as the Channel Islands might need French electricity, France needs British fish. So, I just wish they could, just resolve. We want politicians that are sort of technocrats, not ideologues who are going to throw their own people under the bus to score some political point.
Well, they're all after that. I mean, it's because of Macron, isn't it? He's having his election soon. He wants to look like he's sort of politically posturing. He's the big
6
man.
months away.
Yeah, this is what I'm telling the British to do.
Yeah. But at the moment, look, what's happening is foreign fishermen are fishing in our waters, catching our fish, and then selling them back to us. And the big argument about Brexit was let's get our own local fishermen back in our own local waters and fishing, not these massive international trawlers that soak up all of the fish and leave nothing for the local fish.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing that we've put that in place. It's going to take a while to get there, but what the French are doing is, propagating war. Surely the French don't want a war with the UK. Yeah,
well, I mean, history has shown it won't end well for them.
Well, I think we should... the backup of the EU, that's why he's gone to Ursula von der Leyen. And even though, really, she should tell him to stop being so ridiculous and don't drag all the other countries in, we don't know what she might do. I mean, remember what she did with the vaccines.
But I think this is dragging on from... There's also the nuclear submarine deal between the US and the UK and Australia. So France is still furious about that. So this is more than just Brexit and more than just the fish. It's a deep rift. But I think we should cut off the supply of music to France, and they can just listen to French bands. No Beatles, no Rolling Stones, no Oasis. And you see how they get on with Carla Bruni and whoever else. Have they got any other bands? I don't know. French music is
There's
notoriously terrible.
Jola Taxi.
Oh yeah, Vanessa Paradis. Yeah,
They've got that. I can remember that one.
yeah.
I just hope Macron's got a white handkerchief somewhere laying around handy because he'll need that in the future.
It just seems a bit silly, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, a couple of licences or so, they could easily process them. Why is this such a big deal? I mean,
Yeah.
they tried to retaliate, as you said, with the whole AUKUS deal as well. They weren't happy with the fact that they'd been frozen out, but it wasn't us who froze them out, but we were the reason why that was apparently in their eyes. So I'm thinking that really we actually need to be quite careful on this, because remember there was the talk of the EU army. We didn't really fancy it. A lot of people in this country weren't comfortable with that concept.
Well,
but this is how it feels,
We thought
doesn't
there's
it?
no plan for a EU army. Now it's going full steam ahead. There clearly was a plan and they lied to us. And we talk about Brexit lies all the time, but that's one we never address, is it?
So the worry is if they do become so powerful that in the end, how will the UK retaliate? We don't really have our allies at the moment. Whilst Joe Biden is at the helm of the United States, we don't really have much help.
But would an EU army be so bad? I mean, with Russia becoming more of a sort of autocratic enemy state to the rest of Europe, and with the rise of China, I mean, as much as Britain's got a great naval and military tradition, I don't think we can deal with China on our own. So
we could stop buying their stuff. That would end it there, wouldn't it?
You're right, though, Neil. We do need to reinforce our navy and our army. We need to put much more money into them. We should take money out of foreign aid and put that into our military. Absolutely.
See, we've gone for foreign aid. Do you think? You don't think we should take money out of foreign aid?
No, I think there should still be like a lot of collaboration with Europe over a lot of things. Economically. I mean, obviously we have to have sensible levels of immigration. We have to have sovereignty over our own decisions. But it makes sense. We've got so much shared history and so many shared values. It makes sense for us to be in the same club.
Yeah, but in the same club, but sort of outside the club as well.
Yeah, we're always going to be outsiders. We're on an island, and Britain's always been the sort of punk rock part of Europe that doesn't. I mean, I think we've never had to worry about people moving our borders because they're defined by sea. Yeah. So whereas Poland,
we do, even in the water actually, because it's sort of shifting, isn't it? It's water, and you can't really enforce. How do you enforce a water border? It's quite tricky.
That's a good point. So France have. What are they not suspended? They've captured or seized. They've seized some British trawlers, some scallop trawlers. So they've shown that they can actually do work in the Channel. They can actually prevent boats from crossing the Channel. So if France could do that with the illegal immigrants that keep crossing over the waters.
Yeah, but they're fleeing France. I mean, would you if you're a refugee and you got to France, I'd be like, whoa, let's get to Scotland.
But on a serious note with that, the other threat is that they're putting in place is that they're saying that, well, actually, you pay for the processing of the migrants at Calais. Well, it costs us £7 million a year. I mean, would that be such a bad thing? Would it not be a good idea if actually we had some processing there to allow people to come to this country without them having to take that crossing? Would that not be such a bad...
But why would people need to be processed in France? What, are they fleeing war in France?
Well, that's true, but if people are wanting to come to this country, so just, let's just take it that they want to come to this country, there's actually no way of doing it properly, really, because you have to claim asylum in the country that you're in. Yeah. So if you're in France, you can't claim asylum in the UK, which is why a lot of the migrants will try and get to the UK. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's if you're on an island, then you're quite protected in the way that you won't end up with such a huge influx of people from other countries. Well, but what you could have are people taking these crossings and lots of people taking risks like this. Yeah, no, that does make sense. And I'd like to see more diversity in the asylum seekers we take. Because at the moment, it's mainly fighting-age men because they're the ones who are going to, get in the boat and come across the channel. But on the other hand, I mean, I think it means we're getting the most motivated and hardest working asylum seekers. It's almost like we've set up this sort of Tough Mudder course. The English Channel is like this course, this gauntlet you've got to run. So we're getting the best. That's probably why the British economy is so much stronger than other economies in Europe.
So why aren't they driving HGVs then? What are they doing when they get here?
I should imagine some of them are. When they're finally allowed to work, I should imagine some of them are driving HGVs. I'm sure there's some very talented people amongst them as well.
But in answer to your question, no, we shouldn't have a processing centre in Calais. We should have gunboats in the Channel.
Oh,
we should stop crossing. I won't ask your opinion on this now.
Don't ask me.
You'll get in trouble on this.
If I don't say anything, people just make up the rest, and then because I look so evil.
It works in Australia, so we should do something.
Is that what they do in Australia?
Yeah. You don't see people crossing over to Australia, do you?
It's a much bigger.
It's a bit further.
Bit more water than between.
It's easier for us to police our little bit of water, isn't it, with a few gunboats? say, no, there's no crossing over. If you're illegal, no, go the proper route.
Yeah, and the turn-back policy and all sorts of things they've got in place. Well, this will be an interesting thing. I wonder how it's going to evolve, because people are getting a bit carried away with it and coming out with very extreme options that really don't need to be on the table at all. But we'll see. We'll see how it transpires. Well, as ever, we always want your opinion. To get in touch after the break, it's time for our big debate this hour. Should conversion therapy be outlawed in the UK? Detailed proposals have been published by the government to do just that. We'll get stuck into that one next, but this show is nothing without you. So I want to hear your thoughts on this and every subject that we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk and tell us your thoughts. You can also send us a tweet at GBNews, and there's a poll up right now asking, should conversion therapy be outlawed in the UK? Cast your vote now. We'll be back in a moment.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
So good afternoon. It's time for our big debate this hour. Plans to make so-called conversion therapy illegal have been tabled by the government. A 6-week consultation will invite views on ending coercive attempts to change people's sexuality or gender identity unless they've given informed consent. Now, Liz Truss, the Equalities Minister, said that the LGBTQ+ people deserve to live their lives free from the threat of harm or abuse. So let's start by hearing the thoughts of two people on very different sides of the argument. I'm joined by Simon Calvert from the Christian Institute and a spokesperson for the Let Us Pray campaign. And also on the line is Peter Tatchell, an LGBTI campaigner and director of the Peter Tatchell Foundation. Right, firstly, I'm going to start with Simon. So Simon, welcome to the programme. Tell me a bit about conversion therapy through prayer and why you think it's important to be legal.
Well, I mean, the way that question is framed, of course, is not the way I would see this issue at all. I mean, look, first, can I start by saying thank you for giving us a chance to explain ourselves on this issue. Much of the discussion about this goes on without representation from the churches. I want to be clear as well that what the government says in the consultation paper is that a great deal of the kind of thing we've heard about, past abuse of LGBT people under the guise of conversion therapy, is already caught by the criminal law. They've identified a gap in the law for coercive talking therapy. And again, I don't think anybody's going to argue with that. The concern that we have is that some people would like the law to go much further and to reach in and affect the ordinary work of churches. You get some people who have a pretty repressive idea about using the criminal law to target essentially the beliefs of evangelical churches and the people who worship in them. That's what we need to avoid. And so what the government is seeking to do is to kind of walk a sensible middle line on this issue, where you're not criminalizing the ordinary work of churches. You haven't got the prospect of vicars being arrested for praying with people. I think most people would think that that's profoundly repressive and wrong. So yes, we must tackle physical abuse of LGBT people and anybody else. And a tightly targeted law against coercive talking therapies, again, most people aren't going to have any problem with that. But if you have a law which reaches into the ordinary work of churches and sees Christians being prosecuted simply for explaining and living out their beliefs, I think that would be very wrong.
Well, what parts of, in your eyes then, in the Christian faith, do you feel that this will have an effect on then? Because I'm listening, thinking, well, what specifically in the Christian faith do you think this could affect?
Well, I mean, that's actually a question I would like to ask Peter. What is it that churches say and do which is currently lawful that you would like to see unlawful? Because what I'm concerned about is simply the ability for churches to teach their beliefs on sexual ethics, their ability to pray with people who ask them to pray. There is this kind of caricature of evangelicals that you get where we're constantly portrayed as hating and fearing LGBT people. The reality is that LGBT people visit our churches and they find a warm welcome. And you know what? They're not surprised to find out that we believe some things that they themselves may not believe. That's not a surprise to them. And so we have beliefs about sexual ethics, which may not be fashionable, but they're mainstream, they're long-standing, and they present no malice or ill will towards anybody.
So Peter, welcome to the programme as well. Your thoughts on what you've just heard there, and also your views on conversion therapy.
Well, first let me say that conversion therapy is the attempt to change a person's sexual orientation or gender identity on the basis that it is sinful, immoral, unnatural, or abnormal. It has been condemned by every major medical, psychiatric, and counseling profession in the world. They say it is unethical, that it is harmful, and it doesn't work. So on that basis, the government is quite right to outlaw conversion therapy. Now, when it comes to religious organizations, we know that 51% of every person in this country who's undergone conversion therapy did so at the hands of religious organizations. 51%. We also know from the research on those people that as a consequence of being pressured and told that they were wrong, that they needed to change their sexuality or change their gender identity, that those people suffered from often catastrophic levels of anxiety, depression, and even suicidal thoughts and actual self-harm. So the damage and harm caused by conversion therapy is absolutely beyond dispute. All the major professional bodies corroborate this. It isn't just me saying this. Now, when it comes to religious organizations, at one level, you could say, well, if someone consents to prayer, that should be okay. That should not be banned by the law. But the problem is that the people who are being pressured by religious organizations, and they are being pressured, even browbeaten, they are being told that they are shameful, that they are sinners who must repent, that they will burn in hell sometimes, they're told, if they don't repent and give up their LGBT plus life. In that kind of context, when people are being told those things, and when there's threats that they will be disowned by their family or rejected by their church, it's no wonder that many people will reluctantly agree or consent to conversion therapy, but it's not a free and informed consent. It's not a genuine consent. It's consent under pressure. And these people are very emotionally fragile because of the traumas they've been through, struggling to come to terms with their sexuality or gender identity, but also because of the pressures put on them by family, church, and peers.
Well, Peter, what would you say to that? I mean, Simon, sorry, what would you say to that? You've heard what Peter says, and you guys are saying that you don't want conversion therapy to be banned.
Well, again, I don't accept the way that question is framed. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is I don't want praying in churches to result in people being arrested. I think that's a pretty reasonable thing to ask for. I mean, I've looked at the same research that Peter's referring to here, this 51% figure. The problem with that research into the prevalence of conversion therapy was it gave absolutely no definition whatsoever of what conversion therapy was. Now, again, if we are talking about people being physically abused in churches by or anywhere else, that's illegal. If we're talking about people being coerced into talking therapies, the government is saying it wants to make that illegal. What's left? Now, Peter works with Jane Ozanne from the Ban Conversion Therapy campaign. She says that she wants gentle, non-coercive prayer to be made a criminal offence. She gave an interview in The Guardian where she said gentle, non-coercive prayer should be made criminal under a conversion therapy ban. I think most people would think that's outrageous. And you know, I think we have to recognise, in addition to recognising the experiences of people who've had a very hard time in churches, and that's what Peter's talking about, we also need to recognise the experience of people who love their churches, who love being a part of a Bible-believing church, who embrace the teachings of that church, and who believe that actually the teachings of that church give them eternal life. I mean, it's very, very important to them. And in our churches, there are people who are same-sex attracted, and they embrace the Christian faith and worship alongside us every Sunday. Those people deserve to have a voice as well. And the idea that if a same-sex attracted Christian asks a friend to pray for them, that somehow that should be caught by the criminal law. Or indeed, the idea that somebody could set up a church, and we've seen numerous setups on this issue, ask somebody to pray for them, but whilst actually recording them with the single goal of actually catching them out and getting them into trouble. Do we really want a law that's going to do that? I'm, in all honesty, I'm surprised that Peter is being so hardline on this. He's normally very good on freedom of speech. He's normally very good on freedom of religion. But if he's backing this call for gentle, non-coercive prayer in churches to be made a criminal offence just because it doesn't fit with, you know, sort of fashionable political views, that's very repressive indeed.
Are you saying non-coercive prayer?
Simon, we're not talking about, we're talking about human rights here, the rights of LGBT plus people to be able to live with dignity and respect. And if people are saying to us that we are sinful, immoral, abnormal, unnatural, that we must repent, that we're going to end up in hell, then it's very difficult for people to make a genuinely free, informed consent. Now, I agree with you that gentle, non-coercive prayer perhaps should not be caught within the gamut of this law, but it would depend on the circumstances. If the gentle, non-coercive prayer comes after having perhaps many months or weeks of browbeating by parents or other family members, by people in the church and by their peers, then I think that gentle, non-coercive prayer isn't entirely free and isn't entirely with, informed consent. It's a response to a great deal of pressure, even though the actual prayer itself might, as you say, be gentle. So I think that's a grey area where we need to iron out and come to some better understanding and cross the T's and dot the I's.
Well, thank you so much.
Well, I mean, just to respond to that, I mean, I think what you're talking about there is coercion, which, of course, is what the government is seeking to target. But if you're saying that it should be a criminal offence for the church to tell people that they're sinners, well, Peter, you know very well that is the core message of the gospel. The Jesus Christ died on the cross for sinners. 100% of the population of the planet are sinners. The message of the church is the offer of forgiveness in Christ. So it's absolutely essential to evangelical churches to be able to teach that every single human being is a sinner. And I'm just astonished that you're talking about criminalizing the church's teaching a core and central doctrine, such as the doctrine of the universal sinfulness of mankind.
Yeah, I don't disagree with the right of churches to say that gay people are sinners. I find it abhorrent.
Well, I mean, I'm not singling out gay people in that way.
I defend the right to say it. What I'm saying is that when it's put together with pressure to change someone's sexuality or gender identity, that's where I draw the line. You can say we're sinners, but trying to change people, knowing the adverse psychological and emotional damage it causes, that I think is a step too far.
Well, Peter Tatchell, thank you so much for your thoughts. I'm going to have to leave it there. Just for time pressures, it's been really good listening to both of you. Simon Calvert as well. Thank you so much for joining us on that. Well, today we're asking, should conversion therapy be outlawed in the UK? You've heard what my guests have to say, but in the next few minutes, it's time to hear what your thoughts are and the panel. So this show is all about you, so please get in touch via the normal methods. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
I'm Karen Roberts. Here are the latest headlines. The Prime Minister will deliver a tough message on climate change at the G20 summit in Rome. Boris Johnson will say that countries causing the most global warming must be held accountable. He'll urge leaders to follow through on their commitments to cut carbon emissions. The Prime Minister has also told the European Commission President that French threats over fishing rights are unjustified and incompatible with the post-Brexit trade agreement. France is threatening to block British boats from its ports and tighten checks on vessels if the dispute isn't resolved by Tuesday. The Prime Minister is due to hold a short meeting with the French President Emmanuel Macron tomorrow. Prince Andrew has unequivocally denied accusations that he sexually abused Virginia Giuffre when she was 17. In a document filed to a district court in the US, the Duke of York's lawyers said the allegations are baseless and were an attempt to achieve another payday. Parts of the UK have been hit with almost a month's worth of rain in 48 hours. Flood warnings have been issued and are still in place for Cumbria, South Wales, Somerset and Scotland. Well, I'll be back at the top of the hour with a full news update. Now back to Nana.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
So back to our big debate this hour. I'm asking, should conversion therapy be outlawed in the UK? The government have proposed making the practice illegal. There's a 6-week consultation taking place, inviting views on ending coercive attempts to change someone's sexuality or gender identity unless they've given informed consent. Well, you've heard from my guests, you've heard what they've had to say, but now let's get our panel's view. So, Leo and Calvin, what do you think? Should it be banned? I'm not sure who to go for first.
Yeah, well, the government's not talking about banning it. They're talking about banning it for people who can't give informed consent, so for children. Adults can still consent to conversion therapy. And I think conversion therapy is such a ridiculous idea. Anyway, my friend Stephen, he was sent on conversion therapy when he was a teenager.
Never.
And yeah, so they said, but it's just the idea of, you know, I don't think they thought it through, because if you get 200 gay teenage boys together at a camp, like overseen by religious clerics, there's not going to be less homosexual activity going on at that camp. You know, you've basically just made this, you know, I don't know if it's the same system as like when your dad catches you smoking a cigarette and then he makes you smoke the whole pack. Maybe that's the thinking behind it. But yeah, I think it should be banned. I don't know why anybody would want to do it. I mean, if somebody's gay, then God made them gay. If you're religious. So, you know, fine, live by your book. I've got no problem with people living by their book, living by whatever rules, scriptures they want to live by, but don't make other people live by that book. Or we'll set up conversion therapy for religious people, and we'll come and brainwash your children to not be religious.
No, that's it could work both ways. What do you think, Calvin?
We had an interesting tweet on that, actually, from Fab Pagan, who said, GB News, I would be in favour of conversion therapy if we could have it both ways. Then I'll send Leo to be turned gay.
You do a couple of gin and tonics. That's
But in all seriousness, I just struggle with this because it's an umbrella term that is kind of a catch-all. And what we're talking about here quite often in the debate we just had was prayer. It wasn't conversion therapy. It's not putting electrodes on people's brains and trying to convert them from straight to gay. We're talking about the power of prayer. And there are quite a lot of LGBTQ++, whatever, alphabet people within the church that actually want to live a celibate life and want to live a prayerful, holy life. And that's not about converting them from gay to straight. That's just about living a life by, as you said, by the book and by scripture. And this would actually outlaw a lot of that. And the people we heard from, you know, Peter said pretty much no one can consent to this because everyone in the LGBTQ++ bracket is vulnerable for some reason. And he said even if it was a gentle prayer, even that would be coercive because of all the historic, what do you call it, browbeating from parents. What they're actually talking about here is essentially outlawing parenting. They're talking about changing a parent's role and what a parent is allowed to do and how much pressure or moral values they're allowed to spread or indoctrinate, as you call, on their own children. That's troubling. The state has no say in what character, what values you pass on to your kids.
I think the state should have some say in how you treat your children. You shouldn't be allowed to psychologically torture your children. You shouldn't be allowed to harm them.
Yeah, but you're talking about extremes there, aren't you?
No, but I mean, historically, that's not extreme. I mean, historically, the church used to burn and torture and kill homosexual people. So if we're talking about, you know, what's actually happening, I think this is why it's an issue.
Happening in the 21st century. You always say this is the 21st century now. It's one of your lines, Leo. We're talking about the 21st century.
It's 2021, and it's still happening. It's still happening around. Yeah, the persecution. No, the persecution. Well, if you go to Syria under ISIS, there's certainly you know, if you go to Afghanistan.
But you're just flipping from one extreme to another.
No, it's not. It's not extreme. This is real.
United Kingdom, British
United
law.
Kingdom. There's still a lot of homophobia. There's still a lot of persecution.
You can't outlaw homophobia. The problem with this is
you kind of can.
No, you can't.
Yeah, it's illegal. It's a hate crime.
No, you can't stop people from thinking things. You literally cannot. It will always be there.
People can think things.
This is about.
Yeah, but this is about you know, taking people who can't give consent. So adults. So if you're gay and you want to live a celibate life in the church, I don't know why you'd want to, but if you want to do that, then you can do that. So you're a consenting adult.
From our guest that you can't. That would not.
But he's not talking about the bill that goes beyond. I mean, he's talking about his ideal world scenario. What the bill that's being put put to Parliament or being put to consultation at the moment would allow consenting adults to do what you say.
Fluffy term of consenting, and the problem here is we're overriding freedom of religion. There's all this talk about human rights. Freedom of religion is a human right. That's a fundamental human right.
Yeah.
And the freedom to pray. And I don't think that we should ever be outlawing prayer.
People should be free to follow whatever religious path they want.
Yeah, it's a British value.
Yeah, so why would you drill it into a child's head? Like, let that child reach the age of consent and then decide. For religion.
That's not what this is about.
No, it's not what this is about, but that's what you brought up.
They have a right to pass on their religion to their children. Absolutely. It's not about drilling anything into their heads. And
I don't know. I think people should be...
It's
not an intolerant view. It's a very tolerant view.
It's tolerant of people with other faiths and none.
But what's the difference, though, between if a parent is sort of putting on their religious view to their child? Isn't that a form of indoctrination in a sense?
Sure, yeah, but in a positive sense. You're passing on your culture, you're passing on your values to your children.
What, a culture that involves the persecution of... A culture that involves the persecution of homosexuals, that sees women as lesser people. I mean, what's
culture are you talking about?
I'm talking about pretty much any religion.
Nonsense. Absolute nonsense.
So you don't subscribe to any of the religions at all? Do you think?
No, actually, religious people put me off religion. So people like Simon that was talking about, about this conversion therapy. And also, I don't understand. Can Simon only control his urges if he prays? I mean, why would, if you're straight, you're straight. If you're gay, you're gay. Like, just be what you want to be. It's not a problem.
But I think what he's saying, that there are certain things within the religion that he would follow. So maybe in his religion, it might not be looked on well. Homosexuality might be frowned upon in his belief. I don't know what.
Yeah, there's loads of things. There's loads of things in religion.
He has the right to believe that. Is that not?
Yeah, but to indoctrinate other people, fine. If Simon doesn't want to eat prawns because it says in Leviticus that you're not allowed to eat prawns, don't eat prawns. Don't ban me from eating prawns. Don't indoctrinate children not to eat prawns.
No one in the religious sector is saying we need to ban people from doing anything. It's the other way around. Atheists are saying we should ban prayer. You are preaching against your own stance.
It's not prayer. Come on, Calvin. Historically, it's not like historically the.
You're not arguing about anything. Why you keep going to historically?
Why do we look at history? Because if we don't look at history, it repeats itself.
Here and now, banning people from praying for people who want to be prayed for. That's what we're.
That's not what we're talking about, and I think you know that. This is we're taking children overseas to be told that they're impure.
Let's hear what Calvin has to say. Calvin, what do you think about this?
I think that people should have the right to be prayed for if they want to be prayed for, and people should have the right to pray for people as well. But it goes both ways. And I know a lot of people who are homosexual. I know a lot of people who are straight within the church that want to live a celibate life outside of marriage. And that should be appropriate. If they want people to pray for them, to maintain that holy lifestyle, that is fair on them. And nobody should be able to say, you are not allowed to do that, for either the person who wants to be prayed for or the people that want to pray for them. And I think parents have a fundamental right to pass on their values and their religion and their character to their children. That is our number one job in the world, to raise kids in our own image, with our own values. It's not the state's job to say, no, we think that your values are inferior now because of this and that. We think you should be teaching your kids this and that. That is indoctrination. That's what we need to defend against. Parents are educators, not the state.
Well, when Calvin...
Would you not agree with that, though?
When Calvin phrases it like that, it sounds great, but historically we know that the persecution of LGBTQ people by religious organisations has been horrific. So, we've got to look at that. And of course, parents should be free to raise children and, with whatever values they see fit, but they shouldn't be allowed to harm the child. They shouldn't be allowed to psychologically torture the child. I think it's terrible parenting to send children abroad to straighten outcomes.
Are actually illegal anyway. So
but
also, I mean, if you think about it, years ago, it wasn't just the churches that were, persecuting people who were gay. It was also actually the law itself.
Absolutely.
Actually, the whole.
But where do you think our laws came from? I mean, we've always been and honestly, there's a lot of values and under religion that I agree with and I think are wonderful. But certainly certain things like the persecution of LGBTQ people has always been bizarre, considering the church has always held so many LGBTQ people.
This legislation was set out to protect the vulnerable from being exploited, and what we're actually seeing as a result of this is a lot of anti-religious sentiment coming to the surface, I think, and that's problematic for our country because this is a Christian country.
Well, I think it would be better as a sort of secular country, guided by Judeo-Christian, values, but
it isn't. Right. So today we're asking, should conversion therapy be outlawed in the UK? You've now heard the panel and their thoughts and the thoughts of my guests, so it's time for your say. Lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. Dave says yes, but I suppose if someone who was gay wanted themselves to change, why can't they have a choice? Now that's Twin, is that how I say it? I hope it is. Tywin says, if it's not hurting the participants and it's done freely, then what's the objection here? Bill says it's an abominable and coercive practice driven by ignorance and superstition. Yes, it should be banned in all its forms. Lewis says, if you're gay, you're gay. Nobody can change that. Leave people alone. They can be who they want to be. CJ says, if we're talking about conversion therapy for gay men and lesbians, of course it should be banned. But if we're talking proper therapy for people, especially young children who are struggling with gender dysphoria, then this shouldn't be banned. No, it's essential and proper treatment. There's also a poll up on Twitter today throughout the show asking that very question, and currently 75% of you say yes, conversion therapy should be outlawed in the UK, but the poll hasn't yet closed, so please head over to Twitter and cast your vote. Now, on the proposals, Liz Truss, the Equalities Minister, said this: there should be no place for the abhorrent practice of coercive conversion therapy in our society. I want everyone to be able to love who they want and be themselves. Today's announcement sets out how we will ban an archaic practice that has no place in modern life. Well, still to come, loads more. We'll be talking the Queen after the break. She's been told to rest for 2 weeks. I'll be joined by friend of the show, Caroline Aston, to discuss all things royal. But first, let's check out the weather.
This evening's weather, and the UK is looking much clearer and drier than this morning, though feeling chilly after sunset. For much of Devon and Cornwall, there'll be clear spells for the first part of the evening, and it will feel chilly. Coastal areas may see the odd shower. Across southeast England, it will be dry this evening, but once again, with clear skies after sunset, it will turn chillier than recent evenings. A mix of clear spells and the odd shower across South Wales this evening, but turning increasingly wet and windy through the night here. Elsewhere, it will be a chilly and dry start to the night, but for the Midlands, by the second part of the night, expect the weather to become breezier and cloudier. For northeast England, it will be a much drier end to the day than the start, and it will remain that way overnight. Temperatures will drop to single figures in rural spots. Scotland will also see a dry evening and overnight period, and across most northeastern regions, temperatures could drop below freezing in some sheltered glens, bringing an air frost. Similarly, in Northern Ireland, it will be a dry and chilly start tonight, but here it will turn milder, wetter and much windier by the morning, with coastal gales likely. That wet and windy theme will push eastwards overnight as a band of rain arrives from the southwest from midnight. And that's how the weather is shaping up overnight and into tomorrow morning.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GBNews.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday. Call to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News, for To the Point.
Good afternoon, this is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. Now, the Queen is on doctor's orders to rest for 2 more weeks. She won't attend COP26 in Glasgow this week or any other official visit during that time. But the palace says the 95-year-old has a firm intention to attend the Remembrance Sunday service at the Cenotaph on the 14th of November. Well, I'm joined by friend of the show, royal correspondent Caroline Aston. Caroline, welcome to the programme. Lovely to see you again. So let's not speculate about the Queen's health, but it'll be disappointing for the monarch. She still loves all that active duty.
Absolutely, and she's been doing light duties via video links. I think she will desperately miss not going to the annual Festival of Remembrance at the Albert Hall, although probably that's wise with COVID figures as they are at the moment. But for her, that central role at the Cenotaph every year, that's very important indeed. So her strength is being conserved for her to go forward and do that. Incidentally, very interesting how Buckingham Palace, after kind of almost hoodwinking us by saying that she was feet up at Windsor Castle, when actually she was feet up at the King Edward VII Hospital the other week, and are rushing to keep us as informed as possible, although these are vague statements that are being issued, and I'd still like to know what the preliminary investigations were for and just how exhausted Her Majesty is. There you see her on her feet, talking. It's the small talk, the mingling, very exhausting for anyone. I hate parties when I'm on my feet for longer than a certain period, and she is a very public figure. Amazing woman for her age, and of course they are conserving her strength going forward to the unheard of, never before celebrated Platinum Jubilee coming up next year, just before Prince Andrew gets into perhaps potentially hot water.
Yes, speaking of which, let's talk about Prince Andrew then. The lawyers wanting the case to be dropped. Well, they would do, wouldn't they? But what's the latest on that?
Well, the latest, of course, is that his lawyer, he's got a much more aggressive lawyer acting for him at the moment. And we know that that lawyer's had access to a sealed document, apparently, an agreement signed between Virginia Giuffre and Jeffrey Epstein back in 2009, which the wording of which they seem to see as a bit of a cop-out from there being any case to answer at all for Prince Andrew. But I really don't like the tone of the release that there's been, using words like frivolous, sensationalist, innuendo. I mean, any victim of Jeffrey Epstein, who after all was a convicted sexual offender, really you kind of nullify. It's almost as though he's trying to, how shall I put it, minimise his relationship with this really rather terrible man. OK, Virginia Giuffre has had payments. Certainly, I think the Jeffrey Epstein Victims Compensation Fund paid her money. But to say that she's merely trying to latch on to the royal family because they're the biggest cash cow in the herd, I think is downplaying her sufferings in the past. She was a very young girl when all this was going on. And of course, Prince Andrew has always said he doesn't even remember her, even though there's that now notorious photograph of him, which we see there. He does say it might not be his hand, it could have been a doctored photograph, but you know, I just wonder, look at it and draw your own conclusions. He is not the best judge, perhaps, of his own behaviour, and let's face it, both he and his ex-wife, Fergie, have always been drawn by the irresistible scent of money and luxury. Look how she, for example, not all that long ago, tried to sell access to her ex-husband for a cool £500,000. She could, she said, open doors.
Well, we see. This is the thing. We don't know any. We'll find out all of this. Obviously, the case is still going on. So all these details, the actual details, will come out in time. Of course, none of what a lot of things can't be proven just yet. Let's move on to Camilla and on women's safety. And also, Prince Andrew does deny some of those allegations. In any case, all allegations he denies. Let's carry on. Let's move on to Camilla.
Well, Camilla has spoken out and said that men should become more involved with the current issue of women's safety in the streets. She said that rapists are constructed, not born, and that we all need to work together towards making women's lives much safer. She has received, I think, a little bit of flack for this, the way she's phrased what she said, but interesting to hear her speaking out so firmly, the World of Women event and so on, and sort of lining up her influence as a royal with those protesting so loudly at the moment about what's going on for women. Very interesting that we follow one talk we've just had with another. I quite agree, by the way, going back, a lot of this is alleged, and Prince Andrew has said, of course, that he didn't know Virginia Giuffre, feels he's never met her, and is denied any kind of criminal act. That I accept, but there are still little gaps in the story that I have got my royal watcher's eye on, and will be reporting back.
You keep your eyes on those, Caroline. And of course, Prince Andrew does deny all those allegations.
Indeed, he does.
Thank you so much for joining us. That's Caroline Aston, royal correspondent. You're watching me, Nana Akua, on GB News. More to come in the next hour, so do not go anywhere. This is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. For this next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines. So right now, the show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course, it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. Joining me today, it's Conservative commentator Calvin Robertson and comedian Leo Kearse. Still to come, my difficult conversation today is focused on brain injury. It's been a constant talking point on the news agenda over the last few years, especially in the sporting world, but it's not just in sport. Within the next few weeks, an acquired brain injury bill tabled by Labour MP Chris Bryant will have its second reading in the House of Commons. I'll be discussing this with the CEO of the brain injury charity Headway Hertfordshire. For our big debate this hour, I'm asking, are you buying into the climate change argument? We'll hear from Boris Johnson. He's in Rome for the G20 summit, meeting leaders just days before attention turns to the climate conference COP26 in Glasgow. Our political editor Darren McCaffrey has been speaking to the Prime Minister. We'll discuss what he had to say. And of course, we want to hear from you. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. But before that, let's get your latest news headlines.
I'm Karen Roberts. This is your news at 5 o'clock. The Prime Minister will deliver a tough message on climate change at the G20 summit in Rome. Boris Johnson will say that countries causing the most global warming must be held accountable. The summit comes ahead of the COP26 Global Climate Conference in Glasgow, which starts on Monday. He'll urge leaders to follow through on their commitments to cut carbon emissions.
One thing we've got to achieve is to ensure that we keep alive the prospect of restricting the growth in the temperature of our planet to 1.5 degrees by the end of the century. That's what it's all about. If we can do that, then we stop the prospect of so much desertification. We stop the prospect of the huge geopolitical consequences of climate change.
The Prime Minister also gave an update on the Queen's health. After speaking with Her Majesty, Boris Johnson says she's in very good form and he wishes her well.
It's very important that she should follow her doctor's advice, but as you know, she's determined to be there at the cenotaph. I've no doubt that will happen. I think that we've just got to let her get on and rest. But as you know, she's very, very hardworking. She continues to be at her desk.
Meanwhile, Boris Johnson has told the European Commission president that French threats over fishing rights are unjustified and incompatible with the post-Brexit trade agreement. France is threatening to block British boats from its ports and tighten checks on vessels if the dispute isn't resolved by Tuesday. The Prime Minister is due to hold a short meeting with the French President Emmanuel Macron tomorrow. The Brexit Minister Lord Frost says the UK government is now actively considering launching dispute settlement proceedings. And thousands of climate activists are demonstrating in Rome, demanding immediate action to save the planet. Main roads leading to the G20 venue are being blocked during the peaceful rally. The protesters are determined to send a clear message to world leaders before COP26. Prince Andrew has unequivocally denied accusations that he sexually abused Virginia Giuffre when she was 17. In a document filed to a district court in the US, the Duke of York's lawyers said the allegations are baseless and were an attempt to achieve another payday. Miss Giuffre claims that she was trafficked by convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Royal correspondent Ingrid Seward told GBNews it's good that the Duke is now addressing the claims.
In a nutshell, what Andrew's lawyers are saying is that, she's decided to pick Andrew because he's very high profile. They still insist that he is totally innocent. And it's a very strong case that they've put, but we still don't know exactly what's going to happen. But this is quite positive, and at last they've actually said something.
Parts of the UK have been hit with almost a month's worth of rain in 48 hours. Flood warnings have been issued and are still in place for Cumbria, South Wales, Somerset and Scotland. An art graduate who lost the use of her hand for weeks after her drink was spiked says she still feels vulnerable 5 years on. Polly Sutherland, who has type 1 diabetes, says the drugs also affected her ability to walk because it damaged her blood sugar levels. She believes clubs should scan ID cards to keep a record of who enters. Miss Sutherland says that she was also let down by paramedics and GPs.
I went to them saying that I think, from what's going on, I think I've been spiked. It was almost like a sort of raise their eyebrows, kind of like, oh yeah. Sort of almost accusing me of just kind of taking drugs and now trying to sort of get out of it somehow or making excuses or whatever. So yeah, I felt very sort of let down.
And when in Rome, while most people are focusing on the G20 summit, the partners of the world's leaders went on a special tour of the Colosseum. Carrie Johnson and Brigitte Macron were among those who took part in the event as they greeted onlookers. Heavy security surrounded the 2,000-year-old stone Roman amphitheatre, which was closed to the public. Well, I'll bring you the latest headlines in half an hour. Now it's back to Nana Akua.
Good afternoon, this is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. Now, acquired brain injury is a condition that affects more than 1 million people living in England and Wales. It's when someone suffers brain damage caused by events after birth. Now, within the next few weeks, a private member's bill tabled by Labour MP Chris Bryant will see its second reading, calling on the government to offer more support to people with brain injuries. It's a move that's strongly supported by Headway, a charity which supports people with brain injuries. And I'm pleased to say that joining me in the studio this afternoon is the CEO of the charity Headway Hertfordshire. His name is John Archer. John, welcome to the programme.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you. So, John, talk to me then. Can you start by telling me about acquired brain injury and the impact it has on people's lives?
Sure. An acquired brain injury means, as you rightly said, not at birth. It's something that might come from a stroke. It might come from falling off a ladder or an accident, a traumatic brain injury. Car crashes, cycle crashes, all those sort of things are acquired brain injuries, and they happen too often. They're not a thing that you anticipate or have planned for, so it's very traumatic to the people who are involved. That's both the person who may have survived, but also their carer and their close family. Everyone gets affected by it.
Because, of course, when someone has a brain injury, it can have a very unpredictable impact, can't it? Some people will be affected quite badly. And give us a bit of sort of detail about, you said it quite happens too often. And it feels like, you know, I thankfully, well, my son, he has cerebral palsy, so he acquired a brain injury at birth.
Yes.
But he won't know any different.
No,
but for those who do, it must be very difficult.
It means you have to rebuild your life. You had a quote-unquote normal life, and now you've had a brain injury which has affected the brain. It's a squidgy mass inside your head, and it does get affected by a traumatic hit, or from a stroke, from a bleed in the brain. All of that changes what you thought was normal, and you have to relearn how to cope with life going forward. And that's what Headway's about, really. It's helping people relearn and move forward to an improved life after the brain injury. I think the thing people forget most of all is a lot of the work is done on the people who have had the brain injury, but there's a lot of people in the background also get affected by it and also need to know how best to help their loved ones get through to that new normal, as we call it. Yeah?
Because the brain's quite an intelligent thing in a way. It has all those neurological pathways, and you can retrain it to do different things. But that's easier when you're younger. So, for example, when if you've been born with a brain injury, there's this window of 2 years where you can actually help to change the pathways so the brain can do the same thing, but taking a different route. Yeah. How difficult is it though when people are older, and they've obviously been learning something in one way, then that pathway's gone?
There's a spectrum of things that could happen. So a lot of it is about coping mechanisms that we teach people, how to cope with the things that have now changed in their life, how to get around them. So there is a bit of rewiring, but it's also how you work your life and how you can cope with that. And the people at Headway are great at that. So they really help people understand where their disability is, which might be hidden from the public because you don't see it. But it gives you a path to something close to normal or a new normal where you can cope with what you've got and learn how the brain is working and learn how to get around it. And it's not just the person with the brain injury, but the carers have a great influence in how to cope. So a lot of coping strategies involved in older life brain injuries.
What's the most common reason for someone to have a brain injury?
I would think it's still stroke. If I talk about Headway Hertfordshire, I would think more than 50% of our clients are stroke victims. We're seeing that age come down, which is a worrying trend, where they're getting younger and younger. So most are stroke. Traumatic is accidents, and so that will happen. Some minor brain tumours. We also look after the people on recovery from that. And the most worrying trend, I think, is we have 5 or 6 clients now where the reason for their brain injury is COVID. I
was going to ask about that. Because a lot of people say, oh, well, if I talk about COVID on any social media or anything like that, people say, oh, well, the death figures, it's not that bad, it's a 1 in this chance of it. But there are other things that people, if you take, for example, the TV presenter whose husband had COVID, he's recovering.
Yes.
But is that living? I mean, he's alive. People are not thinking of the other side of this pandemic.
No, we've all heard of long COVID.
Yeah.
But some of the more immediate things, some of the things that are coming through are strokes via COVID, hypoxic brain injury. That's where your brain is starved of oxygen, coming through from COVID. Right. And it's not an avalanche, right? It's not a lot, but there are definitely cases coming through where COVID is the reason for the brain injury. And we don't know how far that will go yet.
I see. And for your charity then, is there a reason why, did you set it up, or is it something that you joined? And have you got a reason as to why you decided to be part of it?
Headway UK, it has about 125 branches across the UK doing great work. I'm looking after Hertfordshire, which, believe me, is enough. And we work out in the community with people with an acquired brain injury, and we work with them to try and make their lives better, both socially and also from an occupational therapy point of view in terms of recovery. So they're the 2 areas we cover. And we're trying to make sure they don't get socially isolated. We're trying to make sure that we get them active and involved as much as we can. A lot of the people that come through Headway Hertfordshire want to go back to work. And so we help them through with a program that gets them back to work. It's called Habit, and it gets them through to a stage where they understand their brain injury, and we start to work on a return to work basis. So there's lots of different things, and it's fantastic work. Some of the people are really great, and no, all of the people are really great.
Some of them are really great. Which ones are?
Yeah, I know, there's a few in my mind, but no, they're all great people, and they're all trying to get back to something like a normal life, or at least cope with what's been dealt them. And they're great people, and I joined because I like helping people, and I really wanted to see these people helped. They're in a minority, they're in a group that don't get much publicity or awareness. The whole thought of an ABI is this hidden disability.
ABI,
acquired brain injury. Beg your pardon. But the whole point of the fact that it's a hidden disability makes it so much more difficult to get some awareness in place and some understanding of what people are coming through. So Headway UK have done great things. They've got an ABI card that says why you've got the brain injury, which you can show to people. I may have a bit of difficulty understanding, I might be a bit slow on speech, I might get fatigued. These are the key issues that come out from a brain injury. And as people know that, they can adjust how they interact with someone, and that's really, really powerful.
It is powerful and so much needed. Talk to me about this bill then that they're discussing in Parliament at the moment.
For years, Headway UK has been lobbying for a better understanding and a more supportive view of people with a brain injury. Other conditions are getting good awareness, but Chris Bryant has really been a champion for years now, pushing through the idea of getting a bill into Parliament that gives a good structure to the support people will get with a brain injury. Because, as I said, it's a hidden disability, it doesn't get that sort of public view, but it's hurting, as you said, millions of people a year. And it's a long-term condition. It will not go away. We can get it better, but it's probably going to be with you for the rest of your life. And it will affect your family, and it will affect your children. And yet there's nothing in place from Parliament's point of view as a bill to give a really solid support network that a bill would give.
I see. So the idea is a support network. In your head, do you have a sort of structure of this sort of thing?
No, I don't. I can't say that.
Okay.
I think all headways are different, and we work within the resources that we have. That's a given. But if the bill was to give structured awareness to GPs, to the NHS, and raise it up the awareness rating and get it the sort of level of understanding and support it needs, it would help people's recovery no end. It really would. The NHS doing a great job, no problem with that. But long term, it's charities like Headway where the work will be done in maintaining that progress and making sure their lives are full.
So where next for the charity then? What are the charity up to at the moment?
Headway UK are looking very strongly at head injury in sport. They're pushing very hard on that. It's a prevention mechanism as opposed to a cure. That's not going to be a cure, but there's some great prevention work could be done in head injuries in sports generally. And the bill, I think, will be a key critical point in where the charity moves forward and how head injury survivors are supported.
And how do you guys get your funding then?
Funding is through lovely people in the trust and grant market. From our local council we get some money, and also our supporters, who are top-notch, also raise money with events throughout the year. And that is the mix of how we get our money for Headway Hertfordshire.
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult though, because as you said at the beginning, it can happen to anybody.
Absolutely.
At any time.
Absolutely. So. There's so many things can happen. We have a client who slipped up in a swimming pool and banged his head and has had real problems recovering and has recovered. There are others where they were cycling, looking forward to a Land's End to John O'Groats thing on a training run, were hit by a car and are really had a struggle to recover, have now recovered to a greater degree, and are now probably one of our best supporters and fundraisers, because they appreciate the work we've put in and everything we've done for them, which is great. And we don't harp about that, that's not what I mean, but they see what we've done, and it can happen any day, unfortunately. You know?
Yeah, and of course, to recover, you know, if you're blessed enough to be able to have a path to recovery, that always takes time, doesn't it? With a brain injury, I think that's one of the key
It takes a long while. The pathway back, it can be quite long. And the clients I have are all so resilient, so positive, and want to make the best. And it actually makes our job easier because they're totally focused on getting back. Yeah, and it's great to see.
And I'm wondering if people want to find out more about the charity and what the charity are looking for. Are you looking for more helpers? What's the...
Yeah, from a national point of view, go to Headway on a search engine. I'll try not to give one away. But if you go to Headway, you'll see fantastic information on their website, loads of stuff about brain injury, where to go and what our campaigns are, and that's probably the best place to point you. If you want to come to Headway Hertfordshire, again, as a quick search, you'll see our website and you'll see what we're doing locally in the county.
Well, listen, John, it's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, and you too.
Thank you so much for joining me. And I'm sure if people are going through something like that, as you said, in particular, it's the people that are caring for those with the brain injuries that will also require some support when your charity offers that.
If they've got someone who needs support, come to us.
Yeah.
And we really will try to help them.
Yeah, often those people are forgotten, aren't they?
Yes, they are. That's the issue.
John, thank you so much for joining us. That's John Archer from Headway Hertfordshire. That bill is currently being discussed in Parliament. We'll find out how that gets on. Now, coming up, it's our big debate this hour. Today, I'm asking, are you buying into the climate change argument? Our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, has heard the thoughts of the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, ahead of COP26. But first, it's the weather forecast.
This evening's weather, and the UK is looking much clearer and drier than this morning, though feeling chilly after sunset. For much of Devon and Cornwall, there'll be clear spells for the first part of the evening, and it will feel chilly. Coastal areas may see the odd shower. Across southeast England, it will be dry this evening, but once again, with clear skies after sunset, it will turn chillier than recent evenings. A mix of clear spells and the odd shower across South Wales this evening, but turning increasingly wet and windy through the night here. Elsewhere, it will be a chilly and dry start to the night, but for the Midlands, by the second part of the night, expect the weather to become breezier and cloudier. For northeast England, it will be a much drier end to the day than the start, and it will remain that way overnight. Temperatures will drop to single figures in rural spots. Scotland will also see a dry evening and overnight period, and across most northeastern regions, temperatures could drop below freezing in some sheltered glens, bringing an air frost. Similarly, in Northern Ireland, it will be a dry and chilly start tonight, but here it will turn milder, wetter and much windier by the morning, with coastal gales likely. That wet and windy theme will push eastwards overnight as a band of rain arrives from the southwest from midnight. And that's how the weather is shaping up overnight and into tomorrow morning.
I'm Neil Oliver. You can join me live every Saturday evening for opinions and discussions about the week's top stories. There's also a smattering of history and archaeology and features that define our great British Isles. You'll hear my thoughts unfiltered, as well as those of my guests, and we don't always agree. And we want to hear from you too. Neil Oliver Live, Saturdays from 7 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GBNews.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday. Call to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News, for To the Point.
So good afternoon. It's time for our big debate this hour. I'm asking, are you buying into the climate change argument? In just a few days, world leaders will descend on Glasgow as they prepare to meet for intense climate talks at COP26. But before that kicks off, Boris Johnson has made his way to Rome alongside a raft of other politicians across the world to discuss the range of topics at the G20 summit. Our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, has packed his bags and made the trip himself. He's been catching up with the Prime Minister ahead of those meetings. He asked him his plans for COP26 this week and a few other things too.
Before we start on climate change, obviously I know you saw Her Majesty this week. Lots of people waking up this morning in Britain pretty concerned, actually. Have you got any updates, or I'm sure you're wishing her well?
I think everybody's wishing Her Majesty well, and I think it's very important that she should follow her doctor's advice. But as you know, she's determined to be there at the cenotaph. I've no doubt that will happen. I think that we've just got to let her get on and rest. But as you know, she's very, very hard-working. She continues to be at her desk.
Let's move on to climate change. I remember, Prime Minister, the Boris Johnson who talked about the doomsters and the gloomsters. I remember a cabinet minister said that we had enough of experts. What would you say to those people, and genuinely on an element of trust, who think that when it comes to climate change, you're being a doomster, and that we're trusting experts who are talking about things decades in the future, who might say that you, in many ways, are being an alarmist about things?
It's a fair challenge, and one of the first things I did when I became Prime Minister was to get in the scientists and to go over the numbers for my own satisfaction at really quite some length. And there were all sorts of graphs and all sorts of points that they produced. But there was one thing that I just found absolutely incontrovertible. It was this a vertical kink upwards in the anthropogenically caused temperatures over the last period and projections for what would happen in the future. And I'm afraid that left me in absolutely no doubt about what we've got to do. The temperature rises and falls naturally over long periods of time, but we've seen nothing like this huge spike that is being caused by humanity. And we've got very little time to fix it. The temperature of the Earth will rise remorselessly over the next century and more, unless we can take steps now to bring it under control. And all we're trying to do at COP 26 next week is to restrain that growth. That's all we can hope to do, and that's why we're asking people to make the commitments that they are.
If there was one thing, because I report on this, if there's one thing to take away from COP that is a success, a tangible thing that we could measure how COP26 in Glasgow success, what would it be? Just simple one thing.
The one thing we've got to achieve is to ensure that we keep alive the prospect of restricting the growth in the temperature of our planet to 1.5 degrees by the end of the century. That's what it's all about. If we can do that, then we stop the prospect of so much desertification. We stop the prospect of the huge geopolitical consequences of climate change, and that's what we're trying to do. But to do that, there are a load of different things that you need to do, with reductions in coal output, reductions in use of cars, planting millions of trees, and so on.
Just finally on this row with France, I know you're going to see Emmanuel Macron. You say you're going to do whatever it takes to defend British interests. What does that mean?
I think we'll do whatever is necessary to protect British interests. But I think, you know, when you look at this, the setting we're in today, It is you could not have a more vivid reminder of how history can suddenly go backwards, and how great civilizations can think that they're on a remorseless march forwards. and look, the Romans, as you will remember, well, here we are in the Colosseum, begun by Vespasian, I think it was, completed under Titus. It stood for probably tens of thousands of people were slaughtered here for the pleasure of Roman viewers. It all came crashing to a halt under waves of uncontrolled migration, immigration. They forgot how to protect their empire. The whole thing collapsed, and it was a disaster. It was a disaster for civilization.
For Brexit by the French?
I think that what we need to focus on, what the French need to focus on, what we all need to focus on, is the much, much bigger things that we have before us in the course of the next few days, particularly tackling climate change.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Prime Minister Boris Johnson speaking to Darren McCaffrey, our political editor. So our big debate this hour is, are you buying into the climate change argument? In a moment, I'll discuss that with today's panel, but first let's speak to regular panellist of the show, former Liberal Democrat MP Lembit Opik. Lembit, welcome to the programme. Good to see you. What do you make of the thoughts of the Prime Minister? What do you think?
I don't buy it, Nana. Factual mistake. He said that things are going warmer faster than ever before. That's simply not true. He needs to explain then the medieval warm period, the Roman warm period. You mentioned the Romans. Those periods were warmer. Certainly the second of those was warmer than now. Why is that happening? Also, he doesn't seem to have any understanding about how the Earth goes around the sun, which is a big factor, how the sun changes, which is a factor. There is no climate emergency. It's awkward for me to say it. I had an argument with somebody this afternoon when I said I was coming on to GB News. Fundamentally, this is a religion which has gone crazy, and that's what's causing the problem. And we're going to do far more harm to life on Earth, or at least human life on Earth, by pandering to this new religion than if we actually took a chill pill and started recognizing one thing which he said, which was right. Climate changes, and that's not mainly about human beings.
But a lot of people might argue with you on that one and say that actually humans do contribute a certain level of carbon into the atmosphere, which has an impact on the pace with which the climate changes. What would you say to that?
Yes, human beings do make an impact, and we don't know exactly how much that is, which is an issue. But fundamentally, I'm saying it's within acceptable parameters. I don't say this because I wanted to enter into this massive war about climate, but the reality is, when I try to have debates with the Greens, they don't come up with any facts. Polar bear numbers are increasing. It seems the Antarctic ice sheet is getting bigger. At least there's more ice there, to be precise. And if the North Pole melted, it wouldn't increase sea levels because it's an ice cube floating in the sea. You can't have these conversations because I'm called a climate change denier. The real deniers are the Greens who think that we can stop climate change. My challenge here, and I'll say it here on GB News again, if you think you've got better data than me, come into the studio on GB News, you share your data, I'll share mine, we'll see who's right.
Well, I think they can potentially slow it down. I don't know whether they believe they can change it, but I think they believe they have some influence.
But slow what down, though? Slow what down? I mean, it gets warmer, it gets colder. One thing that you may not know, Nana, is we're living in a glacial period at the moment. For most of the history of the human race, most of the history of the Earth, sorry, not the human race, there's been no snow on the North and the South Poles. This is an unusually cold period, and we'll probably have another glaciation. And the problem with that is it's really bad for the for life whenever that happens. Boris, who I like very much, I consider him a friend, he made one factual mistake. He was talking about desertification. The world's getting greener because CO2 is a fertilizer. The best time for life on Earth is when it's warm, not when it's cold. And so I would say to our Prime Minister, could you just show me the data to indicate why you think having a bit more fertilizer in the atmosphere is going to be bad for life? He won't be able to answer that question because he's not a climatologist. But there's so many people who would love him to carry on with this agenda. I'm saying, Boris, just stop. Just let's think about the damage that this could do to life in Britain, life in the West.
Well, Lembit, listen, thank you so much for your thoughts. That's the other side of the argument, and you've heard what the Prime Minister thought as well. That's ex-Liberal Democrat MP Lembit Opik. Now, after the break, it's time to hear the panel's thoughts and, most importantly, your views. But first, let's take a look at the news headlines.
I'm Karen Roberts. Here are the latest headlines. The Prime Minister will deliver a tough message on climate change at the G20 summit in Rome. Boris Johnson will say that countries causing the most global warming must be held accountable. He'll urge leaders to follow through on their commitments to cut carbon emissions. The Prime Minister has also told the European Commission President that French threats over fishing rights are unjustified and incompatible with the post-Brexit trade agreement. France is threatening to block British boats from its ports and tighten checks on vessels if the dispute isn't resolved by Tuesday. The Prime Minister is due to hold a short meeting with the French President Emmanuel Macron tomorrow. Prince Andrew has unequivocally denied accusations that he sexually abused Virginia Giuffre when she was 17. In a document filed to a district court in the US, the Duke of York's lawyers said the allegations are baseless and were an attempt to achieve another payday. Parts of the UK have been hit with almost a month's worth of rain in 48 hours. Flood warnings have been issued and are still in place for Cumbria, South Wales, Somerset and Scotland. Well, that's it for now. Now back to Nana.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the political correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday. Call to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the outside.
You can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. every single weekday right here on GB News for To The Point.
So good afternoon, this is GB News. Now, before the break, we heard from the Prime Minister in Rome about his plans for this week's climate change conference in Glasgow. I just want to take you back to one of his quotes from the interview. We've got very little time to fix climate change. The temperature of the Earth will rise remorselessly over the next century unless we take steps now to bring it under control. So for our big debate this hour, I'm asking, are you buying into the climate change argument? So Leo and Calvin, are you buying into it? He's saying that we've got time, we've got very little time, it's going to go on some sort of scary end of the world mission, which is what it sounds like. I'm going to go with Calvin actually first.
No, I don't buy into it. And I don't know if Boris Johnson does either. Darren McCaffrey, GB News' reporter there, was fantastic. He said, you talked, Boris, about doomsters and gloomsters before you were Prime Minister. What's changed? And what was annoying about that is the Prime Minister was contemptible. He wouldn't answer a serious question about the climate. He's going on about Rome and about immigration and not controlling the borders of Rome and the empire collapsing, which is quite ironic considering the Conservative Party haven't managed to control our own borders as our empire is collapsing. But have a serious conversation. Stop waffling, Boris. You know, this is not an after-dinner speaking engagement. This is, you know, prime ministerial issues, and you're going to be at the COP26. We want to know what you're going to be talking about. It's frustrating.
Yeah, I agree with Calvin on this one. I'm not worried about climate change. It's not just because I'm from Scotland, which has a climate that needs to change. Historically, I mean, people say that, you know, we've got record highs for carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. We absolutely do not. If you go back to the Cambrian period, we had 7,500 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. It's now down at around 400 parts per million, so that's a huge decrease. So carbon dioxide levels, you know, pre-industrial revolution, we're actually nearing a sort of a dangerous level, and it's assumed that within 2 million years there won't be enough carbon dioxide in the atmosphere for plant life to actually exist, because what plants do and what animals do, a lot of animals do as well, is sequester the carbon from the atmosphere and store it. If you look at the White Cliffs of Dover, that's based on you know, the shells of sea animals that have stored carbon. So we've already got all this carbon sequestered in the ground. It's not just in oil and gas. So by getting the carbon out, we're just restoring some of the balance of the atmosphere. Yes, the world will warm. There's going to be winners and there's going to be losers, but it mainly doesn't affect the equator. The temperature there isn't affected too much. It affects the poles and it affects the sort of...
What about this Cambrian period that you mentioned? Were people on the Earth at that point?
People were there's a long time before people were on the Earth.
Perhaps we couldn't have survived it then.
We, humans in our current state, wouldn't have been able, we would have been very drowsy.
Well, I think that's...
No, but we're not talking about getting up to levels of the Cambrian period.
But you said that it wasn't as bad as that, and we're nowhere near that. Well, if it was, we wouldn't be here, would we? So I think, right, whilst the point of this is that the planet will carry on, it's just that we won't be able to survive.
No, we could survive. We could survive vastly larger levels of carbon dioxide. People don't look at the positives. So there's a greening of the planet, which your correspondent mentioned. So and in deserts, plants can grow more easily despite the warming, and that's because there's more carbon dioxide, which is plant food. So they don't have to open the stomata so widely to breathe it in. So they don't. Well, we've got to follow the science on this, so they don't lose as much moisture.
So they're following the science. And listen, I'm not saying that I buy into the argument at all. But what I'm saying is that a lot of people are buying into this argument, and there's a lot of science behind it as well.
It's a fashion. So it's a fashion. It's like mullets in the 80s.
Do you think it's a fashion, Calvin?
It is a fad, but I hate this. Let's follow the science, because it's always science is not determined by one argument. There's always more than one argument to science. It's a process. It's a theory. It's extrapolation. And so to say to follow the science means follow one set of principles in science, and I don't adhere to that. But what I struggle with is, as Lempit talked about, this is becoming a religion. Either you're on board or you're not on board. It's bizarre that every 10 years or so they say we've only got another decade or two to change this, to alter this process. They've been saying it since the 40s, since the 30s, and we're still alive, we're still here. I don't think it's as urgent as they make out. I don't think human contribution to the climate change is as important as they make out.
Well, then they come out with something like an electric car that they're going to mine the earth of lithium, and then actually I read an article today that said actually if we are not able to recycle the batteries, then these cars won't actually be any more efficient. I think if there really is a problem with all the things that the things that the cars are giving off and everything else, why can't we use what we currently have and find things like biodiesel and other fuels that we could use of our current cars?
It's more efficient to stay with your car than it is to purchase a new electric car.
That's what I'm thinking. And biodiesel is made
and especially if you're Leonardo DiCaprio, who's got a fleet of cars and then buys a Tesla, and he's like, "Look, I'm being green." It's like, no, you're not being green. You've already got all these other cars.
And we give them the benefit of the doubt and say that humans do have a massive impact on the environment, and there is a climate crisis, and it's urgent. Even if all of that is the case, none of this will make a difference. Because unless China is on board, because China produces more CO2 than the rest of the world combined, and then some. Unless China is going to change, it doesn't really matter what we do in the United Kingdom.
Well, and they're not coming, are they? They're not coming to COP26 at all. I think we've got India on board, though, so that's a good thing. But I suppose China would argue that we've spent many years in this country using fossil fuels ourselves. So who are we to tell them now, in this current crisis, that they shouldn't be using them?
Well, and also China manufactures so much stuff for us. So we've really just offshored our carbon production to China.
And they know that, and we know that, but nobody's mentioning it. There's just, oh, well, China haven't come, so we can't really do anything. Well, actually, if they were serious about this, then we shouldn't be buying our fuel from China. We should be genuinely making our own renewable sources. And I think this whole movement for the electric cars, whilst there is no, well, they don't give out any emissions if we are taking fossil fuels.
Well, they do give out emissions because when the electricity is generated, a portion of that is...
Getting there. Well, that's what I'm getting to. If in the end we are buying the fossil fuel from China, who are emitting this, then CO2 at one of the biggest polluters, then what are we talking about? This feels like a way of actually us spending more money on things.
That's exactly what it's about. So politicians love climate change because, as Calvin says, it's a religion. You've got to buy into it. It exists for, the science behind it is opaque. It's the people in it have vested interest because they're getting all these grants. So it's these sort of technocratic elites that are deciding for us. And then it results in more power for the government and more taxes on working people. So the taxes are already there, stealth taxes. There's a 27% tariff on everyone's energy bill to pay for renewables.
Well, you have to get a hydrogen boiler now and rip out your old one. What are they going to do with all the rubbish from that? I mean, you're going to have a huge landfill site for old boilers that have been used in homes, but they're perfectly in good, perfect working order. Why can't they actually use, if we have this sort of boiler that you think is giving out some bad emissions, try and utilise what we have and manipulate it so that it's less polluting? I just don't understand why we have to start again. I mean, what about all the charging stations for these electric cars? You're going to have to rip out infrastructure. You're going to have to, this is not going to be a cheap and non-polluting activity.
Interestingly, so the SNP have hired a fleet of electric Jaguars to carry around the delegates at COP26. But they don't have enough charging stations, so they've also had to hire diesel generators to be driven around on flatbed trucks to charge the supposedly green electric cars. It's a farce.
Well, I mean, we've talked about energy on here before, and what we need to do is quite simple, isn't it? We just take it in-house. We need to have our own, whether it's nuclear or other means of production. We need to have it in this country. Stop purchasing from China. In fact, stop purchasing from China in general. Stop everything's made in China. Let's go back to producing our own materials and buy British. That's what we need to do.
Well, I'd agree with you. And even the carbon footprint of making one of those cars, it goes from this place to that place. That part comes from there. Maybe it's going on a plane. Maybe it's going on a polluting ship. Maybe... It's a nonsense, really, as far as I can see.
I can remember British cars, and I'm not sure we should be. I quite like my Audi,
Let's find out what people are saying and see if they agree with us today. We're asking, are you buying into the climate change argument? You've now heard my thoughts, my panel's thoughts, and, of course, the thoughts of my guests. So it's time for your say. Lots of you have been getting in touch with our views. Helen says it may be better to speak to actual scientists. Climate change is real and it's here.
Is she a scientist?
Well, she's saying that we should... Well, we would do, Claire, and we have spoken to them, but we're looking at it and really looking at it from a person's perspective, like ours and yours. Tori says, absolutely not, Nana. The whole thing is another scare tactic. Volcanoes are constantly erupting, often simultaneously. Owen says last decade was the hottest on record. Fact. Extreme weather events are getting more imminent. Fact.
That's only if you go back like 100 years. If you go back to prehistoric times, there are vastly hotter times than...
And weather is not climate.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's fair enough. Look, climate change. Liv says climate change is a natural phenomenon on Earth. Pollution, and on the other hand, is an issue for our health. Yes, I could totally agree with that. Peter says they've been saying the same thing for decades and the Earth hasn't exploded yet. It hasn't exploded yet. He's right, it hasn't. We're still on it. We're still
talking. That's a great point, because when I was growing up, there was crazy people in the street wearing sandwich boards saying the end of the world is nigh. And now everybody seems to be listening to them. I don't know why.
Well, they might be saying the end of the world is nigh soon.
Yeah, that's what nigh means.
They used to be Christians, and now they're climate change religious people.
Yeah.
Well, listen to what Oscar says. A good climate scientist won't say the world is coming to an end. What they do say is that it will gradually get worse with things like extreme weather events getting more numerous. OK, well, that's a nice level ending, I think, for that one. Let's move on, because it's time for our quickfire debates, the part of the show where we discuss some of the day's other standout stories. And firstly, it's one I want to dedicate a bit more time to. So, an art exhibition in Bournemouth has been causing a stir because it features realistic replicas of bomb vests.
Now, the display features bronze cast vests also, and others. Look at that, see? Now, Tory MP Tobias Ellwood, who lost his brother in a terrorist attack, described the vests as tasteless and offensive and called for them to be removed. So is this a step too far, or is it just thought-provoking art? Well, here to discuss this with my panel is art writer and curator Manik Govinda. Manik, is this a step too far?
Well, firstly, we have to acknowledge that the MP has faced a tragic loss in the terrorist attack in Bali. So, complete sympathy for that, and that may have triggered his response. But art always has shocked in art history.
Oh dear.
It's always been provocative, and some people will feel upset by certain aspects of contemporary art. So should it be, is it a step too far? No, it's not. It actually asks a lot of questions. Jake and Dinos Chapman, yes, they make work that shocks, they make work that provokes, but they do ask us to consider aspects of life, death, heaven and earth, immortality, and obviously this work plays on those concepts.
You don't think, though, it's a bit tasteless, though, in a sense, because really, how is that art? It's just it's not been drawn. It's just a thing that's out there that we know is devastating. But there's not really been much effort put to sort of displaying it. It's just a display of something that exists. In which case, anything could be art. So this glass on the table is a bit of art.
No, because it's the explosives have been replaced with pens and things like that. So it's. I mean, I'm guessing it sends. I don't know much about art, but I'm guessing it sends a message that creativity and writing. The pen is mightier than the sword, or the bomb vest in this case.
I don't know whether you're being serious with that.
No, I am being serious. I mean, I'm not the art critic. This guy can probably tell you better than me.
I mean, I think. It's a bronze. They're made of bronze, so they're bronze sculptures. They're not, an actual bomb, suicide bomb vest on a plinth. So there is, they are artworks.
Yeah.
They look very real, but then they've been painted. They kind of obviously what the Chapman brothers do is create these sort of very devastating kind of images. But then they kind of joke with it. And I suppose that's what people feel uncomfortable with, that, the splash of colours are very like sort of children's paintings and stuff like that. So there's a sort of innocence and evil kind of combined with the sculptures. And, but, they are uncomfortable, but it is in many ways,
I'm going to say, Manik, your line's breaking up, Manik, so we're going to have to leave it there. Apologies for that. That's Manik Govinda, art writer and curator. Right, so that feeling that you get when you're not invited to a mate's party? Well, I think Greta Thunberg might be getting it now. The Swedish climate campaigner says that she wasn't and hasn't been officially invited to COP26, even though it seems right up her street. So what do you think? Should she be invited?
She definitely shouldn't be invited, because then she'd have to burn carbon to get there, like all these 25,000 delegates are doing. They're all like jetting in. They're not riding horses in. They're jetting in. They're gonna have a big jolly at taxpayers' expense, and then they're going to go back again.
And do nothing, probably.
Why would she be invited? What are her credentials? She's just a school kid, isn't she? I don't understand why.
Well, she's been talking a lot about climate change. A lot of people have been listening to her.
People shouldn't listen to her. I think she's just a popular kid. There's nothing in that.
But she's passionate about what she's
doing. But I don't ask people who are passionate. I don't think
it must be galling if you're a climate change scientist and you've spent decades researching, becoming an expert in your field, and then like some 11-year-old girl steps in and everybody pays attention to them instead of you. That must be how comedians feel when an open mic act gets a spot in Live at the Apollo.
And I know we've lost Manik, but can I just address the contemporary art issue? Because I think your question was spot on, Anna, in that this glass could be art in the contemporary sense. And that's the problem with contemporary art. It's not art. Art isn't supposed to be provocative. It's not supposed to elicit erection.
No, art is supposed to.
It's supposed to be beautiful. It's supposed to be point your gaze towards something greater than humanity. And art should take mastery. It should take skill. It should take talent.
I thought you didn't want to point gaze anywhere.
And these days, Steady on. These days, anything like Tracy Emin's dirty.
Oh, that was a joke.
It is a joke.
If I'd known,
they're taking the mick out of us.
If
Don't
just say, Leo, if I'd known that a bed like that would have got so much attention, I would have brought in my little Citroen C1. They could have a look at that.
If anyone can do it, it's not hot.
Now listen, let's talk about this. The term is something that's crept into our national vocabulary over the last few years. It tends to conjure up images of city-dwelling hipsters poring over social issues while sipping on spiced lattes. But what does it actually mean? Merriam-Webster defines it as aware of the actively attentive to important facts and issues. So now we know exactly what it means and what she's saying it is. Is being called woke offensive? Would you be offended if I called you woke, Leo?
I think you'd be incorrect if you called me woke.
But would you be offended?
I wouldn't be offended because you'd be wrong. It's like if you called me a teapot.
But no, but woke.
Woke. I mean, it should be an insult for people who are woke because they should feel bad about being woke. Because woke doesn't mean, I know that's the dictionary definition of woke, that you're awake to social issues or whatever. I think a lot of us are awake to social issues, but we're not horrible people about it, and we don't use that as a lever to exert power over people and bully them. So
or be abusive just because you believe you hold the moral high ground, which I find most irritating. What do you think, Calvin?
I think it is offensive, but so what? There's nothing wrong with being offensive every now and then. And I think what we're talking about here actually it links back to the contemporary art thing, this does, because it's all about transcendentals. And I've tweeted about this recently because I think the culture war is a war on transcendentals. So these woke people have done away with our image of beauty. It's no longer about art. Is no longer about beauty. Art, whether it's architecture or paintings, it's all about reactions and being provocative and being woke. And goodness is no longer about doing good acts. It's no longer about doing good deeds. It's about virtue signaling. It's about appearing good. And the last remaining transcendental is truth. And they're getting rid of truth too. It's no longer about universal truth. It's about my truth. It's about being subjective.
Or your truth, like Oprah said, with those 17 inconsistencies. Right, let's move on. This one's a little bit lighter. Celebrity chef and Michelin star winning MasterChef judge Marco Pierre White has weighed in on one of the greatest issues of our time. The question, should we put pineapple on pizza? His answer, absolutely not. Pineapple on pizza? I like pineapples on pizza.
Yeah, I like pineapple on pizza as well. Not in every pizza, not in a mushroom pizza.
No, I didn't initially. But what it is, as I've got older, I've noticed that my mouth starts to stick to my teeth, and the saliva's sort of gone. So pineapple on the pizza allows me to actually swallow the food, because otherwise I start to struggle.
Oh my God! It's like you're being fed in a hospice or something.
I feel I have been. Yeah,
take your soup, man.
It does. I need to drink water with the food, because otherwise I can't get it down the throat.
Let's not get you started on your throat and the air conditioning.
Oh God, no.
But there's nothing wrong with having pineapple on your food. I think Marco Pierre White is actually a disgrace of a chef.
How could you say that?
Only time.
It depends whether you like his food or not.
Yeah, because the only time I've ever agreed with the woke lot on cultural appropriation is when Marco Pierre White tried to do jerk chicken, rice and peas. The guy took white rice, green peas, not kidney beans, white green, and boiled the chicken in with the rice. This is objectively disgusting.
Amazing. That sounds like Scottish food.
It does actually. Well, listen, I've got to say a big thank you to my wonderful panel. Leo Kirst, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Nana.
And also Cal Robinson.
My pleasure.
I'm going to say thank you to you at home as well. It's been such a pleasure. We've got so much still to come here on GB News. And actually, I'll be back tomorrow as well, around about 4 o'clock. We'll be discussing all the main top stories and also your views as ever. Keep them coming. Keep it locked to GB News. I will see you tomorrow at 4 o'clock till 6. Whatever you do, do not go anywhere. Enjoy your Saturday evening. Good night.
This evening's weather, and the UK is looking much clearer and drier than this morning, though feeling chilly after sunset. For much of Devon and Cornwall, there'll be clear spells for the first part of the evening, and it will feel chilly. Coastal areas may see the odd shower. Across southeast England, it will be dry this evening, but once again, with clear skies after sunset, it will turn chillier than recent evenings. A mix of clear spells and the odd shower across South Wales this evening, but turning increasingly wet and windy through the night here. Elsewhere, it will be a chilly and dry start to the night, but for the Midlands, by the second part of the night, expect the weather to become breezier and cloudier. For northeast England, it will be a much drier end to the day than the start, and it will remain that way overnight. Temperatures will drop to single figures in rural spots. Scotland will also see a dry evening and overnight period, and across most northeastern regions, temperatures could drop below freezing in some sheltered glens, bringing an air frost. Similarly, in Northern Ireland, it will be a dry and chilly start tonight, but here it will turn milder, wetter and much windier by the morning, with coastal gales likely. That wet and windy theme will push eastwards overnight as a band of rain arrives from the southwest from midnight. And that's how the weather is shaping up overnight and into tomorrow morning.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there. My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.